All right, y'all. I want to get into this testimony. This is from, I think it's God's Voice Today is the channel. I'll link the channel down below in the description. Now, this is what sounds like a very insane testimony. The title of the testimony is I Heard Hell's Music and it sounds like today's song. Let me play this little preview, all right? And then we'll skip to the actual testimony.
I was one of the biggest drug dealers, if not the biggest, at a school of like 5,000. Eventually, I was robbing people. One day, I went over to my friend's house. We started doing drugs. I started to feel something so different. I felt the presence of something coming, and then all of a sudden, all I could think about was Jesus. Time was going by, and I kept feeling this thing get closer and closer, like it's about to be over. And I fell out. I'm on the ground, and all of a sudden, I'm in this tunnel full of thorns.
I'm in this tunnel full of thorns. Okay. That's just a preview. That's just a preview. Let's get to the testimony. I'll link the full, I'll link his channel down below. It's called God's Voice Today. This is my first time watching the testimony from their channel. And I'm glad I stumbled across their YouTube channel. I'm eating some mangoes in between the testimony. Man, your boy hungry. I know some of y'all be getting upset, like, why are you eating and da-da-da-da-da. But come on, I'm hungry. So let's just hang out. Let's listen to a testimony. Let's be reminded of God's goodness. And hopefully it can remind us of our own testimony and how far God has taken us. All right, let's get to it.
Absolutely. So yeah, before I gave my life to Christ, like growing up, I didn't really know too much about God. My grandparents were believers. They lived across the country though, so I went to church a couple times with them. But it wasn't until middle school when my parents started going to church. But I didn't understand any of it. It was a big church, easy to just be there and leave. So eventually I stopped going to church. That was like my only real encounter with like being around some real Christians and one of my close friends who was Christian at the time. But fast forward, I started like getting addicted to money. The love of money started a lot in middle school. I started scamming people, and then I started gambling online because there's just different weird ways to gamble as a kid, Bitcoin and stuff. And then when I got into high school, that's when I started to get into an interesting place. I played basketball my whole life, and I broke my ankle really, really bad in two places. So I was just going to the practices. I couldn't play, but they still wanted me there. But then eventually I was like, all right, I'm leaving. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. And that's when I started to try and find my identity elsewhere, because that was my identity, was basketball. And I wanted to encounter something supernatural. And that's when I started smoking weed, because I was like, let me do drugs. I hit up my friend. We started smoking. From then on, my life was completely different. I started selling drugs because I already had that addiction to the love of money. Started selling, started doing worse things, worse drugs, until eventually I was one of the biggest drug dealers, if not the biggest, at a school of like 5,000. And it got really bad. Eventually I was robbing people, doing crazy stuff, acting completely out of the character that I know my family raised me up in. And I started making music heavily. So then by the time I was in my senior year, I was able to get posted on some big platforms like WorldStar, and moved out to Hollywood right when we graduated. I had scholarships to go to school because of my dad, some things that happened in the military, and somehow I was able to keep good grades during the whole time. But I decided I wanted to go to Hollywood and pursue music and fall into to that foolishness, honestly. And while I was down there, I remember going to clubs, doing the same stuff, getting, breaking into stores, getting handcuffed on the streets. But God always kept me. Like, I had many times where I should have went to jail. Like, I was handcuffed on the sidewalk, handcuffed on, against the wall. In some way, the drugs disappear. Like, they're just gone. Like, I had a couple instances where it's like, how did they not see me break into these stores, and they just let me go. So I knew God, he just didn't want me to go down that path. And eventually I moved back to Indianapolis, where I was from. I was still doing the same stuff. And then that's what led into eventually that supernatural encounter there when I was still in the midst of selling fake IDs and a lot of addiction to like Xanax and different stuff like that.
Hey, if you're enjoying this interview, can you do me a huge favor and do two things? Can you subscribe to the channel and like the video? Those two things help me spread the message in the YouTube algorithm world. So if you could do those two things for me, they'll be awesome. Thank you so much in advance. And now let's get back to the interview. Enjoy.
I was going through a lot of like really interesting, weird things. Like I started getting deeper into studying witchcraft, but like I was afraid of it though, like because I heard enough about God and stuff to at least like have some sort of fear. But like a lot of the music that I was put on to and that I would listen to with a good friend of mine, they did a lot of witchcraft. They're like Haitian and they influenced a lot of big artists like underground, and though they would speak in demonic tongues. It was just really weird stuff. And that influenced me, and I started to have these witchcraft symbols. I wanted to get tatted on my neck, these certain witchcraft things. And that was like a point in my life where I started to realize, okay, if these spiritual things are real, then, you know, like something's going on. And I started having weird dreams after this encounter. But so one day I went over to my friend's house in Indianapolis, and it was casual day like usual, doing drugs, chilling. Right when I got over there, immediately after we started doing drugs and hanging out, talking, putting something on the TV, I started to feel something so different. Like I felt the presence of something coming, and I felt this sense that I was about to go to prison, like some sort of prison, to be entrapped. And I remember like getting up. I think I told my friend, like, I don't know why I feel this way. Like, I know there's no police coming. I know no one's coming for me, like the cops, because they don't know like anything that we're doing or anything. But like, I feel this way. And I started walking around the room, just walking around, like feeling so weird. And then all of a sudden, all I could think about was Jesus. And I didn't know Jesus at all. Like, I've heard of Jesus. You know, I heard about him in church, but I never had like a reverence for Jesus. Like I was doing a bunch of bad stuff and I didn't really care. But all of a sudden this conviction came to me. And it's so funny. It's so interesting because it's like, why was I convicted of this when I was just like robbing people? Like not too long before this, but the first conviction that I had was the words I was using in my music, like how I was influencing people in my music. This conviction came over me. I remember literally telling my friend, like, yo, bro, I don't know why I feel like this. Like, I feel like we need to change like how we make music. Like we need to change something. And then, but that feeling didn't stop of something coming to get me. And it was feeling closer and closer, more urgent. And eventually I went outside. I think he was freaking out too. Cause he's like, yo, what's going on with you, bro? And I went outside. I was out in the street, pretty much stuck there cause I was freaking out. And all I could think about was Jesus in that moment. And I started to say, like, I love Jesus. I love Jesus. For some reason, I knew I needed him because it felt like I was going to die or something was going to happen. I started saying, I love Jesus. I love Jesus. But I didn't know Jesus. I didn't really love him. I was just saying that. So then eventually time was going by and I kept feeling this thing get closer and closer. I only know how to explain it as if it was like a movie. Like it was just like, you could feel the urgency just shift deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, like it's about to be over. And I found myself in the middle of the street, I believe, or next to a bush or something, right next to the parking. And I felt this thing just come over me. And in that moment, it felt like time had stopped. Before that, I felt like I was like, look, I need to like find some way out. And that was only Jesus. But in that moment, it was like all hope left. Like there was no hope. Like it was over. Like I knew it was over. It was wraps. And I just stood there like dead face. And it felt like time stopped in that moment. And I knew that there's nothing for me. And I fell out. And I usually tell people like, I don't really know what fully happened. All I know is what happened to me. I don't know if it was a vision. I don't know if I overdosed in that moment, if I did die. But I'm on the ground and all of a sudden I'm in a tunnel and I'm in this tunnel full of thorns and I still had some sort of flesh and I was being pulled through this tunnel and it was dark, but I wasn't focused on nothing around me. What I was focused on was me being pulled through this tunnel and having my flesh ripped over and over again. The worst pain ever felt in my entire life, ever. And in that moment, one of the biggest torments that I had was that I did not know if it was ever going to end. Immediately when I got there, I felt eternity. Like I knew in that moment that like I was going to be somewhere for eternity. I knew that. I had that feeling of eternity once I got there. And as I'm being pulled through this and going through this pain and this torment, I'm hearing a voice speak to me. It's almost as if there was something pulling me in with me and trying to convince to me that this is what God wanted for me, telling me that this is what Jesus wanted for me, lying to me, trying to pervert God like all along. This is what he wanted, and trying to pervert him to the degree that this is what is for everyone once they die, that everyone will be going through this. And it was scary, but I didn't want to believe it. And like looking back, I think that's why I was pushing it so strong. I didn't want to believe it. I still wanted to have some sort of hope. And so I kept getting pushed through this tunnel. I didn't know when it was going to end. And there was no end to the tunnel. It was getting worse, but there was no end that I could see. But after what felt like days went by, I eventually finally got taken to somewhere else. And it was almost like just like it's an instant. I'm just in some other place. And this place was completely black, just completely dark. The only way I know how to explain it is like space, but like no stars or anything. And I'm just stuck there. And it was like almost as if like my body or my muscles or something was just clenched up, stuck. And I'm just shaking. And my teeth, I like the Bible says, like gnashing against each other. And I'm just stuck, just there shaking. And this immense pain and hopelessness was over me like crazy. And I remember that thing, which I believe is the devil or some demon or something, was there still convincing me, trying to convince me and pervert God that this is what he wanted for everyone. And there were some interesting things also that were going on that this thing was trying to convince me of. I think it was things that stemmed from things in my past. You know, I grew up, my dad being black, my mom white, but my dad always says, you know, you're black. Like you're black, people are going to treat you like you're black because you're mixed, you know, like you're going to be treated that way. And so I always just, you know, claim myself like I'm black, you know. And the devil, I believe, was telling me and trying to tell me, you know, that all black people also are going to go to hell, are going to go here and go through this torment, and like how God doesn't love them or something like that. I just remember that sense and that feeling and rejecting everything. It was just very interesting that like the devil would try to attack me in that area or try to convince me of that and pervert God in that way. So I'm there and it feels like days are going by again. That hopelessness is just there. I'm just going through pain and not knowing if it's ever going to stop or if now I'm going to go somewhere else and be tormented more. I didn't know if I was dead. Like I didn't know if it was just over. Like I had no idea. And then that's when I get taken down. And you can feel like the weight, you know? And all of a sudden I'm over this city. I'm not in it. I'm over it. And there's something with me. I don't know if it was like still the devil or if it was God trying to show me something. I don't know what it was at that point. But this was a point where I had an interesting realization that, you know, I thought about a lot even after. I was looking at this city. It looked like people were going through torment on both sides, but there was a wall or a fence dividing them. It looked like they wanted to be together, but they couldn't. I don't know if that was part of like the torment that they were going through, but I had this huge feeling. Or I'll explain it after. I'll explain what else I saw. Right outside of the city, there was like these like creatures, these skinny, tall creatures look like demons. And they're around this fire or this blaze. And they were just speaking, uttering in these demonic tongues, is what I would call it now. Like this demonic language, chanting. And what was the craziest part was it sounded like some of the music that I had been listening to. And I heard people on the music that I used to listen to, like With like some of the names of the songs even was spoken in tongues, like weird stuff. And I've seen videos of people speak demonic tongues, and even someone say like, hey, before I go in there and I record, something happens. Once I get on the mic, I black out and something else takes over. And then when I get back out, I don't remember what I said, but I listen back and it's really fire. But it's like, really, it's just a demon taking over. So I feel like either God was showing me or I was just seeing it that, a lot of the music is literally demonically influenced from hell. And that scared the mess out of me. And I'll explain what happened kind of after I got out of this experience, how that affected me. But then during that same time when I was looking over all of this, I had this feeling that there was a point that I was brought to that it felt like almost everyone is brought to. I don't know if everyone's brought to it or not, but like it felt like this point of like knowledge of things that I knew where I had to make a decision to be like, I want God or I want the devil. Like I want God or I want, these demonic things, because now I seen it. Like I can't deny it. Like I have to say, okay, if this devil is real and all this spiritual stuff is happening, then God's real. And I felt that huge sense. Like I had reached this place where I had to make a decision. Like I had to. And I didn't want nothing to do with the devil. Like the whole time I was fully against it. I feel like that's why I was going through all that. I was fully against it. Like I was just so ignorant. Like I didn't know I was going to go to hell. Like I remember being on drugs. I don't know if it was after or before this, looking up at the moon, being like, wow, God is real. Like, and having this sense of peace, but like I'm robbing people. Like I didn't know I was going to go to hell if I didn't have Christ. It was just ignorance. But then in that moment, it was like I called out or cried out to God, like out of my spirit, like out of my inner being. I was immediately taken up and I was in this huge room. It was dark, but it was like velvety. The only way I know how to explain it, like velvety. And I was on the ground and I felt like a child in that moment. It's almost like I could see myself in purity or something. Like I felt like a child. And I felt all these waves of love just overflowing me, penetrating me, like the deepest love like I've ever felt, like overflowing me, like waves showering through me. And after I got saved, it reminded me of the verse that talks about how Apostle Paul is saying, like, I want you to know like the height, the width, the depth of the love of God, like how great it is. Like that's how I felt. And immediately I knew, like I just knew in me certain things. I knew I was with my Father. I knew he was God. And I heard a strong voice speak and say, I love you. And he said, you're going to be reborn. And I had no idea what he meant by that at all. Because I wasn't in the Word. I wasn't reading the Bible. I had no idea what he meant. I'm thinking like, what? So maybe I'm going to come back as a baby. Like, what does that mean? Like, I'm going to be reborn. He said, go and live perfect. It's like in the moment, like that wouldn't make sense. But later on, like, the Bible says like, be perfect just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Not that we're going to be like absolutely perfect in our flesh, but we try to be like Jesus. And right after that, he shows me my dad. And my dad's, he's not dead, he's alive. But at that time, I had like bitterness and anger and hurt towards him because of just like natural things growing up, different things happening. He was a good dad though. But I had all this anger and hurt, and I began to cry. I was just like, I love my dad. I love my dad. I love my dad. And they just love just overflowed me for him. I got set free. And then God began to speak to me. And I knew in that moment that there were certain things I was not going to remember. Like I just knew that. But he was telling me, and he told me they had all these plans for my life and all these things. And I felt this purpose hit me. I was just so excited. I felt the Holy Spirit. I was just so excited. Like I was so happy. Like I felt like a kid who was just like, yo, I want to go do like what my dad wants me to do. Like I'm hyped. Like I'm so happy. That's how I felt. It was like so exciting. And it's funny because it's like there's so much persecution and stuff we go through in this life. But like there, like I just felt so excited that I was called, and that he wanted me to do these things. Wow. And I remember just being excited so much that I was like I want to go back. Like I was I was excited to go back and do whatever he wanted me to do. And then I woke up. And it's funny because I've heard like a lot of testimonies where like they'll go to heaven or hell or and then eventually be in heaven or something. And then God gives them a choice. Like I didn't have no choice. Like I wanted to be like doing whatever God wanted. And so this I didn't know until later. I don't know if it was a couple months later when I really thought back on it, but I woke up, the first time I woke up, I was in an ambulance. I didn't know, because in that moment I didn't like feel my body. I just felt that same like peace as if I was still there in heaven. And immediately, like almost like a movie, just like I had an open vision where it was like almost like a scroll like ripped open. Like I see it there right in front of me, and I see it flashing between different people singing in heaven. And the funny thing is that I was seeing even like African, like black people singing in heaven, the same thing that the devil was trying to like say some crazy stuff about. But like just the beauty of the singing was so overwhelming. It was so beautiful. And then it went away, and I hear this same voice say, "Sing, my son," just so loud, so powerfully. And I just began to sing like the loudest I ever sing before in my life. I don't even know what I said. I have no idea. But I began to sing out like so loud, so powerfully. And then I was just laying there. I was like, yo, God is real. Heaven is real. Heaven is real. I started saying heaven is real because I was so excited. I was like, heaven is real. And then I realized that there's two people next to me. Now, I'm assuming that it was like the ambulance people, unless it was some angels. But I don't know. I can't say that. I don't even remember like seeing them really. But they began to say like, yes, like heaven is real. Heaven is real. And at that time, I was like with somebody, and I really wanted to see them. And I was, for whatever reason, I thought they were there. I was like, oh, if I'm in heaven, I thought I was in heaven at that moment. Like I didn't think I was on the earth because I felt, and I was like, if I'm in heaven, I could do whatever I want. And I tried to just leave, just leave, like fly out wherever I was at. And then I literally felt like myself come up. I saw myself come up out of my body and then just boom, pass out. Like, no, you're not going nowhere. And that's when I woke up in the hospital bed. And eventually my mom came. I still had all this peace, like, because it was like, yo, like, what just happened? And I don't even remember saying really anything to her. I just remember getting in the car, and I still have it in my notes. I had wrote down, like, I don't know what happened, but Jesus is real and heaven is real.
Wow.
And I was just like, I can't forget. I remember in that moment, I was like, I can't forget how real that was, because that was realer than what's like me being in this car right now. I was like, I cannot forget. I was adamant. I was like, I can't forget like how real that was. That was God. And I never wanted to forget that moment. And I went home, and the crazy thing is like, you know, I started selling drugs again, started doing the same stuff. But during that time period, it was like a 2-week time period, I was thinking about what had happened. And I stopped listening to the music. When that music would come on, I would feel something so eerie, so disgusting, so foul. I couldn't listen to it. Like I remember being with friends being like, bro, turn that off. Like I can't listen to that stuff. I can't listen to it. It was specific music from people who are doing witchcraft, or like that were blatantly doing witchcraft. I just couldn't hear it. It was too harsh. And so then what happened was during that time is when things started to happen. I started to realize like witchcraft really, really is real. Certain things are real. And I had this dream. I was with somebody at the time, and I won't disclose too much, but in the dream, somebody came to me in a black SUV. And this was one of the realest dreams I ever had. Like before Christ, especially, I didn't have like dreams that felt this real. Like it was crazy. Even to this day, like some of the dreams I have today didn't feel this real. I'm in the middle of the street. This person gets out the car wearing all black, like looks so different, comes up to me and says like, that they wanted me to join their family of like witches. Like I knew they're all witches. I was like, what the heck? Like, nah, like I'm good. Like I don't want that. But I felt like she was gonna kill me if I didn't join them. I was just like, you know what? I'll get in the car, because she wanted me to get in the car, but I was not gonna join whatever they wanted to do. So I got in the car. She drives back to the house. And when I got in the car, there was other people in there dressed in black. But it wasn't that person's actually family. Like I know their family. It wasn't them. It was some other people. And I go into the house, and someone else I was super close with that I knew was like getting into the witchcraft stuff was in there, part of their family, and trying to encourage me to join them. And I got to a certain place where I was sitting on the chair. I was so scared. I was like, heck no. And I dipped and I ran out the door. I was like, I'm not doing it. And I woke up and then I texted that person. I was like, yo, like I just had this dream. And then for the next like couple weeks or week or so, they were trying to convince me that they weren't a witch. I was like, if you don't believe in that stuff, why are you trying to convince me like that you're not that? Like, you just think I'm crazy for even saying that. And the other person kind of distanced himself from me. So I noticed that. I thought it was just weird. And I was just like, you know what, let me back away from it. So then after all this happened with this dream, all that weird stuff had happened with those relationships I had. And it was like it felt like I just denied like whatever the devil wanted me to accept. And now maybe I could accept Christ. I don't know. But I remember being in my basement of my house, and I don't remember if I was watching a video. I don't know what happened, but this conviction just overflowed me that I need to give my life to Jesus. I need to repent of my sins, like, or I'm going to go to hell. Like, I need to change my life. And I got on my knees. I called on Jesus. And in that moment, I felt that same love overflow me that I have felt when I had that experience in heaven. And all these chains, I felt like chains fell off me. I felt myself being made new in that moment. And I lost the addiction to Xans. I lost the other addictions I had. I was drinking almost every day. I lost them in that moment. And from that day forth, I was a completely different person. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell nobody. And then eventually she just came up to me after a couple of days. She was like, you're not the same person. Like, what happened to you? I was like, I gave my life to Jesus. She was like, I knew it. My mom's funny. She's like, I knew it. And she was so happy because like they were planning on kicking me out at that time. I didn't even know it, but because of the path I was going on and my little sisters being there, all that stuff, bad influence. But now they love God too, which is amazing. But yeah, so then after that, started serving God, posting a lot of videos online about Jesus. I was afraid to talk to people as much about God. I did it with some of the people who I was close to. So I just decided, you know what, let me go online. Let me start posting videos. Those started blowing up, reaching a lot of people until eventually I met more people on fire for Jesus. And yeah, I think it was later that year, December 31st of 2020, I left the house and I began doing full-time ministry, traveling around doing missionary work.
Wow.
Until today. Yeah.
Wow, man, so much to unpack. I'm curious to hear more about music. For example, I have an 11-year-old son. I have two sons, and the oldest one is into music. He's making music. He's listening to all these different artists. Do you believe in this Illuminati stuff? And so it sounds like clearly music is affecting people because devil was over the worship in heaven, right? Before he was a fallen angel. Do you believe in the Illuminati, and do you believe that?
I'll let you guys finish it. I'll link the interview down below. I want to say something before I forget, because I'll forget. A few things. The first thing, I know a lot of people, when they hear testimonies that involve drugs, they kind of check out, and they kind of like disregard it. Because I think, there's some people who will just say, well, that was just the drugs. That was just a hallucination. That was just the drugs and this type of stuff, right? But what I always say is, regardless of what that situation was, in this case, it was drugs. So he was high under the influence of whatever he was, taking. Look how God used that situation. You don't think God can use a negative situation and turn it for his good, for his glory? Look how he came out of that situation. He said he wrote down in his notes that heaven is real and Jesus is real. Those were the two conclusions that he walked away with. He went into that day, going to his friend's house with bad intentions, to sin, to get high, to satisfy his flesh, to do whatever he wanted to do, completely not thinking about God, had no reverence of God, wasn't even thinking about it, right? And then he came out of that day with rock solid conviction that heaven is real and Jesus is real, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that he had mentioned something about his parents and how when he told, his mom, because his mom was like, yo, what's up with you? You seem different. And he was like, I gave my life to Jesus. And his mom said, I knew it. I bet you that his parents were praying for him. 1,000%. I bet you that they were praying for him. And this is why it's so important to pray for the people that you love. Pray for your family members. Pray for your friends. Pray for the individuals that are struggling, that are far from God, because you never know what type of miracle God can work in the lives of the people around us. So that's why you got to keep praying for these individuals. Even if you start to lose hope, and it seemed like, even his parents were starting to lose hope in him. His parents were saying, yo, we're thinking about kicking you out. They're even starting to lose hope. They don't even know if it's going to turn around. But I bet you they were still praying. They were still praying. And look what happened. God turned that whole situation around. He turned that whole situation around. There was something else that I wanted to say, and I knew I was going to forget it. And I already forgot it. That's why I had to stop and pause the video to say this. But ultimately, I want y'all to be reminded of, he said, pretty much the next day or the next week after all this happened, he went right back to selling whatever he was selling, right? Went right back to the block or wherever. I don't know how they was doing it, but he went right back to it, right? Which is real. Like, that is real. So many people think that it's going to be like an instant transformation in your life. And I'm not saying that God can't do an instant miracle. God can he can do whatever he wants to do. He can do that. But I've seen a lot more testimonies where people have a radical encounter and then God allows them to still work through whatever they were struggling with and battling with, but God gives assistance in the form of conviction. God gives assistance in the form of discernment, in the form of dreams, in the form of visions, to show you exactly why what you're doing is so wicked, so that you yourself can come to that realization and recognize your desperate need for God. And I think in that process, there's so much that we can learn. And there's so many different things that we can, latch on to, that we can give to other people so that they can learn from our mistakes, so that they don't have to go through the same things that we went through. So like I said, God can do an instant miracle and transform your life overnight. But for me, he left me in a lot of my mess, so to speak. And the difference is he gave me the tools, or he showed me that the tools were there from him so that I could work those things out with his assistance. Obviously, this is by his power. It's not by my strength. It's all by the strength of the Holy Spirit. But through the Holy Spirit, he's empowering me to get through my mess, to conquer my sin, to crucify my flesh on a daily basis. So that was a beautiful testimony. That was a great testimony. What is his name? Let me see if they put it in the description. His name's Jordan of Yahweh. So on YouTube, this is his YouTube right here. This is his YouTube right here. So Jordan of Yahweh on YouTube. And then also the same thing on Instagram is Jordan of Yahweh, if you guys want to follow him. That was a dope testimony. It really was. Let me know what y'all think. Get in my comments, like this video. I'm out, y'all.